Hey guys, HackerSploit here, back again with another video. And so a lot of people have been asking me to actually make some more videos on remote access tools, or RATs as they're so called. And I have quite a few videos on the channel about various RATs. So we talk about the Caser RAT and B-Logger to be another one, to be exact. In my opinion, Remcos RAT is pretty much one of the best remote access tools out there that you can use for Windows. Now, of course, when I say that, I'm specifically referring to a RAT that works on a particular operating system, in this case on Windows. Right over here, I have the website. The link will be in the description. And so the name of the RAT is called Remcos. And of course, that is an abbreviation for Remcos Remote Control. And it is from breakingsecurity.net. All right. Now, the great thing about Remcos, the thing that I like, is it has two versions. You have the community edition, or the free version, and you have the professional edition. Now, I'm going to be reviewing the professional edition because that's where most of the functionality is. You should definitely check it out for yourself if you want to. So you can basically go through the home page here. I'm just going to be going through all the features very quickly, and then I'll take you through how to set it up and all the advanced functionality that you do get with the RAT. So first of all, it's lightweight and fast. So you have your control panel, which is your command and control center rather, which is coded in Delphi, and the agent is coded in C++ for performance. Similar to what I explained earlier, most of the remote access tools are developed in C++. So it runs on any Windows. This is the great thing. So it runs from on any Windows, from Windows XP to Windows 10, both on 32-bit and 64-bit architectures, including the server editions. So you don't need any .NET framework installed or any other dependencies, which is fantastic. You don't need to install anything extra. No Java, it's just a launcher or a plug and play. You then have a robust connection. So essentially it keeps the instance alive, or the session alive. So it's much better than having a reverse shell or a interpreter session, because you have persistence. All right, the connection is encrypted, and I'll show you how to do that. It is extremely or extensively customizable, as I'll show you. You have multi-thread, so you can operate various machines or clients, and you can have various profiles, all of which I'll get to. You have remote screen capture, you have the file manager, file search, system managers, power options, and you have the console, access to the console and scripting, which is where most of the power lies. All right, now when generating your binary with Remcos RAT, you do need to disable your antivirus, just to make sure you do not any of the signatures for this particular file are not being actively detected by the antivirus or any antivirus that you have installed. That being said, this is not going to be obfuscated. The client is not going to be obfuscated or encoded in any way. It is simply going to be compressed. Now, that being said, getting this onto your target is going to be the tricky bit. And that's where I have to sort of bring in the notice that this video is strictly for professional or for demonstration purposes only, and I'm simply showing off the functionality of this particular piece of software. Now, remote access tools are not used for the sole purpose of malice, or they're not used for any particular malicious objective. Rather, they can be used by system administrators, or you simply want control over your computers and you want remote access to them. So that's primarily where you'd use, or you would want this type of functionality. That being said, there are various uses for a remote access tool, and I'm sure many of you who are out there would find this extremely useful. Now, for our environment, I'm going to be using a Windows 10 virtual machine as our target, just to show you that it does work on the latest operating systems that we have out there. And here is Remcos. When you have it downloaded, it will be in a folder, and once you've activated it, you should be good to go. So it's sorted out very, very simply. Hopefully I've zoomed in the screen so you can actually get a closer look at the window, because the font is a little bit small. So this is your active connections page. If you've ever used a remote access tool, this should be pretty self-explanatory. You then have your proxy servers. That's the fantastic thing that I forgot to mention, and one of which I will be making additional videos on. You then have your automatic tasks, where you can add an automatic task right over here. That could involve sending the console a command prompt. You can also download particular files from the system. You can download your keylogs if you have activated a keylog on your client. or on the binary file. You then have your password recovery. If you are performing a password recovery on an automated basis, you can then uninstall the agent again when you feel you're ready to, and I'll get to that in a second. You then have your local settings. This is where you add all your ports and the particular ports that you'll be listening on. And I'll get to this in a second. You then have your preferences, where you can essentially just control the various preferences, and these are all to do with your server or the command and control center, or this particular window right here. All right, so you can go ahead and take a look at all of those options. That's really not important right now. You then have your ping and keep alive. This is very important. So your ping on host connection and enable the keep alive system. So the ping interval, the value is used, the value is the time interval between each ping. So lower it to increase the reactivity. So I like keeping that at 10 seconds. And then you have the timeout. The value affects the local side controller timeout only. It determines the maximum amount of seconds to wait for a ping reply from the remote host. So that's pretty much okay with 10 seconds. So you can also save these settings in an ini file. So that's really fantastic. I like that you can have various profiles, more of which I'll get to in a second. You then have the IP blacklist, which you can enable right over here. So you can really see the advanced functionality that you're getting with this particular RAT. You then have your update, where you can check for the updates. If I just perform an update check right now, you can see I already have the latest version, and of course you can save that as an ini file as well for that particular configuration. Now for listening ports, this is where you would say, for example, you can add a port here that you're going to be listening on particularly, but I'll get to that in a second. You then have your agent builder, and this is where all the magic happens. Now before we get into that, we have the event log, where you can see that it's going to give you a bit of a log as to what you've been doing, and this is basically for accountability, so that you can monitor all the changes or all the actions being taken by anyone or any of the computers connecting in, or any of the actions you have performed with the command and control center. You then have the about section right over here. So this will give you a bit of information about the product. You have the official web page, the forum, the change log, terms of usage, the instruction manual, which I do recommend you go through. You have the support, you have contact, and you have the website breakingsecurity.net, so you can go and visit those. Now let's talk about the agent builder, because this is where all the magic really happens. All right, so the agent builder is where you would add your IP or your DNS connection here if you are using something like no IP, which I don't recommend anymore. But that's one way of going about it. And I've talked about all the various ways you can perform your port forwarding. Now, given that I'm on a local network, I'm going to be using my IP, which is this computer's IP address 192.168.1.101. And this is going to be your listener, all right? And right over here, this is the connection socket. Now, the great thing about adding your listener is you can specify any port. So, for example, I can say port 1234, and you can make this as hidden as you want. But of course, this is going to depend on what you're using this remote access tool for. If you're using it for any malicious purposes, which I hope you're not going to do that, then you're going to try and make it as undetectable as possible. But in my case, or in a system administrator's case, you're simply configuring it to make it as useful as possible. So the password is left there for encrypting the connection between the client and the server, or the command and control center and the client, which, as you know, when using a remote access tool, you're essentially creating a botnet depending on the amount of computers you have connected, which are managed in the connections tab. But let's go back to the agent builder. So you can add a password. I'll just add password to encrypt it with that particular passphrase, and I can add a socket. You have your connection interval in seconds. I'll leave it that to 1, and we want a 0 delay right over here. So these settings should be pretty much self-explanatory there. You can add as many sockets as you want, which means you can have various command and control centers. So for example, if you were sharing resources with another system administrator somewhere around the world, you can also add their IP address if you've configured the port forwarding correctly, and this binary file will be able to communicate to your computer or to your command and control center and to theirs. You can load and save profiles. So for example, I can save this profile here, and I can save it on the desktop, which it already has saved it. So I can just say save, but I don't want to do that. You can also you can delete the profile, refresh, all that good stuff right over here. All right, now the default profile is the one you're going to be using, and you can sort of modify that, and you can load various other profiles that you have saved. All right, so that is pretty much all to do with the sockets. Now let's talk about the installation. Now if you want to install the remote, if you want to install it as a remote agent, you can specify that. I'm not going to do that. I want to keep it as a binary. I don't want to install it, because if you install it, you add the added bit there, you actually have it running on a computer, and it's much easier to get, it'll be much easier to be detected by a particular antivirus software. So in this case, you have various installation directories. So you have your app data, you have the user profile, which I really don't recommend. The temp folder is always at risk, especially if the person is, if the target is computer savvy. They might be in the habit of constantly deleting their temp folder or the contents of the temp folder. You have your Windows, the System32, which is pretty much the best place you should be having this in. But you can specify that. For example, you can give it an unambiguous folder, like for example, you can say, well, really not Minecraft. I can say something like VLC, and you can give the file name whatever name you want. So I can say vlc.exe. All right. Now the great thing about this particular binary is that you can perform automatic elevation, and you can disable user account control. Sorry, I actually got confused there. So that of course requires admin privileges on Windows, and this pretty much gives you entire or complete access to the system. You can execute any command you want. You can delete files at the system level, which is fantastic. All right, so I'm not going to install it as a remote agent, but that functionality does exist. However, if you take a look at the startup methods, this is if you want it to start up or to run on startup, which I highly recommend you do if you want persistence. You can run it on, pretty much my best guess is running it on the LM winlogon shell right over here, which will essentially execute a shell on startup. You can also use the other startup methods if you want. And of course the startup value name also has to be changed. However, if you are doing it, if you are doing it with legally, without any malicious purpose intended, or without any particular malicious objective, you can change this to something that is a bit more detectable, or something that you can recognize as a service, so that you can know whether or not it's running as a system administrator. So you can say, for example, a remote access, or something weird like that, whatever you feel is appropriate for you. All right, you can also hide the file, which is really good. That means, however, as I said, this is going to depend on the user you're going to be targeting, because many users through Windows would have enabled to show hidden files. And then you have melt the original file, which is essentially get rid of the original file. And then you have the build name here, and this is for the mutex. Now, in my case, as I've mentioned, I'm not going to be using or installing a remote agent. I'm just going to be having a single binary that I'm going to be using to demonstrate the functionality. However, you can do that. Now, the great bit about this particular remote access tool is that you have the watchdog module. All right, now the watchdog module allows you to protect the file and the process from being touched or interfered with. So if I click on this little info panel here, you can see that the watchdog module is there for persistence. So this will protect the Remcos process and the file and registry entries from corruption or deletion. Now that is just brilliant. So you can also use that if you want to. If you do have users that will try and delete it or get rid of it, there you go. So in case of accidental program termination, watchdog module will resume Remcos functionality. This way, the remote administrator can be sure to never lose control with the remote side without having to restart Remcos manually and physically on the remote controlled machine if something goes wrong. All right. Warning: when enabling the watchdog function, the only easy way to terminate Remcos will be to close or uninstall the commands from the CNC or the command and control center, which I'll get to in a second. So be sure to enter valid connection details for the build so that you can control and uninstall the remote client from the CNC commands. And of course, you can protect the registry entries, which is the registry persistence, more of which you can do as well. So I can do that as well because I do want to have some level of persistence. Now, for the particular case of this video, I'm just going to leave it as Remco so that I can detect it more easier and so that we can move it around our system. We then have the stealth. Now the stealth is going to be quite important as well, because if you leave it visible, it's going to be visible right over here in the tray icon, and it's going to have a visible window. You then have the visible minimized. So it's going to start minimized in the tray icon, which we don't want. We want an invisible session where no tray icon or window will be created at all. All right. Now this is where things get really exciting, where we talk about process injection. If you have used Metasploit before and you've performed any of the Windows exploits, whether that they are through SMB, you know that you can inject, you can essentially inject the session in various processes. For example, or when you're essentially performing privilege escalation, one of the great ways to do this is to inject it into the explorer.exe. Well, sorry about that. .exe right over here. That's if you do want to inject it into a custom process. I don't want to do that in this particular case, so I'll just leave that as it is. And then you have your keylogger. All right, now the keylogger is really cool. And you then have your clear cookies and logins. So if you just take a look at that, this function will eliminate browser cookies and stored logins. This is essentially if you want to wipe it. That's really if you want to have that at all. This may be good for people who have cyber cafes and you want to clear out a session before the next user gets on. That's a great way of doing that as well. I'm going to enable the offline keylogger, which is going to log everything, and we want the log file. We want to store the log file in the. I'll just keep it in the app data file, and we'll just put it under something like. We'll just keep it under something like Java or GRE or something like that, GRE. And we'll leave it as logs.dat. You can also crypt the logs, which I do recommend, and you can hide the logs file, and you can limit the size of each of the log files right over here. So that's limited to 10,000 kilobytes. Sorry, and you can also leave it to 0, which is unlimited. So we can also do that as well, and that is essentially going to be the log files. You then have your surveillance, where you have your screen logger. I know this video is actually taking quite a while now, but anyway, I'm not really going to be using the screen logger, or you can actually enable that if you want to. It does come with it. I'll show you that in a second. And then you have your offline audio capture. You can actually record audio files 5 minutes long, and these are essentially going to be stored in whichever folder you specify. And then once you're ready, once you have an active connection to the target, you can then download the files back to your command and control center. So nothing exciting there. And then finally, you have the build. All right. Now the build is where you're essentially going to have, you have the assigned name. You can then compress it with UPX or Empress. I'm going to be using Empress, and the professional agent right over here. If you specify the light version is going to be a smaller sized agent. Surveillance installation, watchdog injection functions removed. Ideal for remote support sessions. So if you do have a remote, if you are a system administrator and you do provide remote support, this is a great way of doing it as well. You can use the light agent. The professional agent gives you the full-featured Remcos functionality. All right, so I'm going to be using the professional version. I'm just going to rename this to Remcos. You can rename this to something as unambiguous as you want. For my particular case, I'm going to leave it as Remcos because I want to know where I actually have it, and so I can transfer it onto the computer. So I'm just going to hit build, and we pretty much should be good to go now. So I'm just going to hit build. So if you see right over here, it's going to tell you UPX and Empress packers can cause instability on process injection and file process watchdog functions. It is recommended that you either select no packer or disable process injection. I did disable process injection. 1 second before I actually save that. Where is the process injection? Well, let me just get rid of that. That's pretty much why it should be. It is causing that issue. Anyway, so I'm just going to go back into the build. For some reason, it's telling me, should I go for UPX then? All right, so we'll just go for this anyway. I'll save it on my desktop, and we'll just call it Remcos agent, and I'll just hit save. And it's going to tell you right over here, the Remcos agent is successfully built, and it's going to save it on your desktop. All right, so we're good to go now. Now, as I mentioned, this is not encoded or obfuscated in any way. So when you talk about antivirus detection, make sure you disable your antivirus on your command and control center. Right over here, because it is going to detect it as malicious software, and you don't want that to happen. All right, so you can go ahead and take a look at all the features that were added here. And now once we have the agent, what I've done here in my virtual machine is I have a a shared folder It's essentially sharing the desktop of my command and control center so that we can access the files on it. For some reason it isn't opening up my Explorer here. One second. So we have the Remcos agent right over here. Let's go back in here and let's go back to the file share or the remote share, as it's the folder share, whatever we're going to call it. So desktop, and we have the Remcos agent right over here. All right, so I'm just going to copy the Remcos agent onto the desktop here, and we can get started with the functionality. All right, so now it's very important to understand the options that we specified in regards to the visibility of the agent. So once we activate it, if you have enabled persistence, that's fantastic. If you have specified to install it as a remote agent, that's also great, because then you have persistence regardless of whether or not the user turns off their computer or not. In my case, I'm just going to run it here, and I'll check my command and control center. Well, in the first case, did we actually add the particular port? So let me just add it, port 1234. And the password right over here, and add that right over there, and immediately you can see we get a new connection right over here. So you have the PC, the assigned name, the agent version, the operating system, the IP address, etc. All right, so if you go back into the connections here, right over here, let me just minimize that. So we currently have the connection and the computer or the client connected to us. So this is sorted out very, very well. You have your location, you have your assigned name, the computer, this is the computer name right over here, which I haven't changed because it is in a virtual machine. The operating system, the latency, which is going to be very low because they are running on the same network. You then have your active window, which is the program manager, the idle time. You then have the system uptime, the IP address, the port, the RAM assigned to this particular computer, and the mutex. All right, now performing any task on this particular client is very easy. All you need to do is right click on it, and you have your control center here. Now in your control center, this will essentially just give you a basic overview of everything you can do to this particular computer. So for example, it gives you the computer name, the OS right over here, the OS version, the system uptime, idle time, the active window. In terms of the hardware, you have the RAM, the CPU. You have the process path, which it'll give you, which is fantastic. So it's on the desktop, the installation path on the desktop, the key logs path, which we have specified is under app data roaming, GRE logs.dat. The screen logs path we didn't because we disabled that functionality, and so for the audio capture. We then have the event log, which is great because it gives you a bit of a log as to what has been done to the client. You have the RAM usage, which is standard Windows, 1 GB has to be used on idle. You then have your CPU usage right over here. You have your status, latency, remote IP address, the local connection address, the TCP port, the privilege level, the assigned name, the Remcos version, and the mutex. You have the country. For some reason it's telling me I'm the United States, but I'm not. But anyway, there you go. If you do have location enabled in Windows 10, it should be able to disclose that information as well. That being said, you can control it directly from here. You can go to system, where you have all the options in regards to the system functionality, surveillance, network, extra, Remcos functionality. That's all to do with the client. So you can rename it, you can ping, you can reconnect, you can restart, you can show the connection on the target, you can elevate privileges, you can update, you can close, and you can uninstall it completely and delete all the files on the system. You then have the local, where you can browse downloads, copy you can copy the IP address, you can copy the computer or user, and you can blacklist IP. All right, so you can do it all from here. Now, if I go into the system and we go to screen capture, and I capture the screen, you can see it captures it for us, and we can stop right now. And this is essentially giving us a live feed. Let me just drag this onto the side here. And let me see if just see if you can see that I'm actually interacting with the system right over here. Of course, the latency is going to be an issue, but it does give you an idea of what the user is doing. All right, so that is currently on my other screen here. So that is screen capture. You can also enable remote input, which means if I right click here, you can see that it also opens up the dialog box, the right click dialog box here. And if I click on refresh, it will refresh, and there you are. That means I'm currently interacting with it right over here. That's the fantastic bit. All right, so if I just open up a start menu here, you can see that it does open up as well, which is really awesome. However, it's interacting on a keyboard mouse click method. So if you want to enable mouse movement, you can also do that. You can also enable the original resolution, which I don't recommend. Let me just close that start menu there. It's getting really annoying. You can also save a screenshot to any type of folder. You have the interval in terms of seconds in which to update, and you can also stop right over here. All right, so you can also auto-save all the frames if you are monitoring someone or performing remote surveillance on someone. But there you go. All right, so for example, I can just show you right now, if the person has left their computer, I can essentially open up their command prompt here. If I just, or I actually should have ran this through the run dialog box. So I can just hit R. Sorry, for some reason that didn't work. And there we go. All right, so that does work. All right, fantastic. So that is essentially the screen capture. So you can go ahead and take a look at all of that here, and it gives you the resolution, the frame size, all that good stuff. You can also increase the JPEG quality here. So if we increase it to 100%, that will give us the maximum amount of quality, and of course that's going to reduce essentially the amount of time in which your actions and the delay between your actions on the target system. All right, so I'm going to close that now. That is essentially system, the functionality offered by the system panel. You then have the file manager, where you can essentially access all the files there. So let me just minimize that once more here, and I'll bring that up. Sorry about that. So this is your file manager. Now the great thing about your file manager is that you can essentially browse through all the directories, all right, now, or all the disks available, all the network shares, which means you can essentially target any computer on a network if they do have any particular file shares enabled right over there. So we'll stay on the C drive. You have your file transfers here. If you do want to download a file, this will be stored right over here. So you can open the local downloads folder. That is going to be stored under Remcos and under downloads over there. So just to let you know. So for example, if I wanted to download a file from the system, let's say I go to users, Alexis, and I go to desktop here, and I can upload a file. I can create a new folder. So for example, I can create a new folder, and I'll just call it test right over here. And since we've created that folder, what we can do is we can close this here, or we can just open that up one more time. We can go into the control center, open up the screen capture, and you can see right over here we have the test folder that was created. All right, which is great. So if we open up the test folder, hopefully it opens up here. Let's see if we can create a little file here remotely. So I can go into new. I don't know whether you can see this clearly. I should have edited this inside post-processing. So let's see if I can create a text document. That is currently on my other screen. So I'll just say test, and I'll just hit enter. And there is going to be latency, but that's part of the deal here. So I'm just going to close that now. And we've created a folder there, and we can close our, we can essentially close our screen capture right there. So now once you go into test, you can see that it updates live, which we can also perform a download on it. So it's empty, so it won't be downloaded. So there you are. So again, if we go back into the system here, screen capture, it opens it up for us. We can go into the test folder once more, and we can just open up the test the test.txt file here. Hopefully it opens up a notepad session for us, and we can just say this is a file, and we can just hit save here. I'm just simply showing you that all the mouse and keyboard functionality does work. So I'm just going to hit save, and we should be good to go there. Let me just drag this to the side here, because that's the maximum amount I think I can expand here. If I just expand the resolution, does that scale with it? No, it doesn't. So that's primarily where the screen resolution will come into play. So I'll just close that right now, and if we just refresh this, let me just perform a refresh there. All right, so if we hit download, for some reason, all right, so yeah, if you want to refresh, you just go back a step, and there we are. All right, so you can also right click and hit refresh, just hit click on download, and it's going to be downloaded right over here. So we can open the local downloads folder, and we have the test file downloaded right over here. So I'm going to breeze through a bit of the rest of the functionality. So it did open up the notepad file here. Sorry about that, guys. There's the notepad file. For some reason it opened it up on my other screen. Give me a second. Let me just close that up. All right, fantastic. So I don't need this file, so I'll just get rid of that. So that is essentially file control. You can essentially create files, delete files, all that good stuff. When you talk about the other pieces of functionality, you have the file search. You can search for particular files. So for example, I can search for Remcos. Well, that is not particularly under Windows, but I can just search for Remcos here. Remcos, and hit search, and that is going to essentially search the entire system, and you can view the system resource usage right over there depending on what you're doing, just to see if it is noticeable on the user's end, because most of the people actually realize that they're being hacked or their computer is being remotely accessed because they hear, you know, the system resources go through the roof. That's if you are doing anything like mining on the target computer, all that good stuff. So I'm just going to hit stop search. That's the basic functionality there. We then have the process manager. We can manage all the processes, and this is what I really like. So for example, I can kill particular processes. So what I'm going to do is let me just start a process on my target here. Let's see if I can just open up a system or a process here. I'll open up Edge, all right, and I'll open up I'll open up something a little bit better, a little bit more expressive of the functionality. So let me just open up an app here. Sadly, I don't have any other additional applications open up on this computer, so I'm just gonna have to find something that works both ways. Wow, this is really sad. I don't have anything. Let me try and open up a Windows, a Metro based app. I'll just open up the PowerShell because that's the only thing open right over here. So if we just refresh this right now, let's see if we do have the PowerShell session right over. So we can see that we do have the Remcos agent right over there. We also have the PowerShell session. So if I open up screen capture, you can see we have the PowerShell right over here. We can terminate that directly, and that's going to terminate the PowerShell session. So there you are. Works like a charm. Really great stuff there. All right, you now have your service manager where you can manage all the running services. If I right click over here, you can stop, pause, restart. This is where things get really crazy. The amount of stuff you can do here to cause damage, and also to manage various pieces of hardware, or to manage an entire group of computers is really amazing. I know this video it's taking a while now, so let me just go through a bit more of the functionality. That's how great this remote access tool is. Let's take a look at the registry editor. So, you know, you can edit all of the registries. You can delete registries, which is really scary. So HKey local machine, system, let's see if we have, well, Windows is under software, right? Microsoft, Microsoft data access. So yeah, you can pretty much do all the damage right under this, right in these particular registries, and you can essentially play around with the various policies here. For example, policies, the communication policies, that doesn't actually belong under the software. I'm looking for the other registry. In any case, you can essentially edit all the registries here. So for example, I can click on delete the value, rename, I can add values. Yeah, you can do a lot of damage with this. All right, so that is the registry editor. You then have the installed programs, which currently are 0 because I simply just spun this VM up right now. So nothing much there. You have the window manager, where these are the currently open windows. So again, I can just open up PowerShell, and I'll refresh that. Does it open up PowerShell? Oh, sorry, that didn't really open up anything there. Where is PowerShell? We'll just open up a calculator. Well, that doesn't work as well. That's not showing up as well. Can I PowerShell there? Refresh. For some reason that doesn't pop up. Probably because I disabled user access control. Most of the Metro apps aren't really working. That's something to take into consideration as well. We then have the clipboard manager. Hopefully this does work. So we can get the clipboard data. So let me just open up this right over here. If I type in something like, let's see, this is a file. And I'll just save that right over here, save. And we can exit that. Let's go back here. We'll go to the clipboard manager. We can get the clipboard data, and there we are. This is the file. That's what I copied there. We can also set clipboard data. So for example, we can set an executable command. We can write a few scripts, which I'll get to in a second. So that's the clipboard manager. Now the execute command stuff is where things get really exciting, because I can, for example, execute things like CMD or actually PowerShell, and I can show you that that did work. So screen capture, that did work as well. So I can go into the process manager, and this shows you how much you can actually control on the target. So we'll wait for the system process, the processes to actually open up here. And within this, we can then look for the CMD. We'll just terminate that right now, and that should terminate it in a few seconds once the connection has been sent. For some reason, that's taking a while to enumerate. Well, there are two systems here. Well, oh yeah, so they have different process IDs. Did that one actually work? I think this is being sent through one channel, so let me just try that one more time here. Terminate. Yeah, all right, so that did work. One of them was being used by the screen capture. So that is we've talked about the commands that we can execute there. So you can execute any of the system commands. We then have remote scripting, which is where things get a lot more interesting. So within remote scripting, you can essentially type in Visual Basic Script. You can also use JavaScript. You can also use batch script. So again, start CMD, echo hello remote, PC pause. So for example, if we just say something like sup, we'll just open up the screen capture. I know that's a weird little message to send there, and we just hit execute script. Well, for some reason that was terminated. Let me just get rid of this dialog. It keeps on showing up here. Let me just bring that up. So I'll just execute the script here, and I'll bring up the virtual machine. And right over here, you can see it tells you sup. So yeah, that does work. So there you go. All right. So the reason I'm breezing through this, you basically get the idea. In regards to the remote scripting, you can write any Visual Basic script here and execute it. So really, the amount of power you have is unbelievable. So let me just close that dialog box here. I want to expound a bit more on the surveillance functionality before we actually get forward. But one cool thing is I can set the wallpaper. So let me just browse into my pictures folder here, and I'll go into wallpapers, and we'll apply this little black Windows wallpaper right over here. And we'll just hit open, and I'll just hit set wallpaper, and I'll just drag this here, and there you go. So that's pretty awesome. So this can really scare users. And of course, I'm not really recommending this for malicious purpose, but again, that's the functionality you get. You can also play around with the style, so you can stretch, fill, fit, and tile it if you want. So I'm just going to cancel that, and we'll leave the wallpaper as it is. And then you have the power manager, where you can essentially shut down, sleep, hibernate, restart, so on and so forth. So that's all to do with persistence on a very basic level. So you then have surveillance, where you have your webcam, microphone. So if you open up webcam, this will allow you to capture a live feed, or you can capture single pictures. Now I don't have a webcam connected, or I've actually disabled it. So if we just hit single, I'm not sure it'll actually work because I haven't connected it to my virtual machine. Let's actually try it out. Input, we'll go into the devices here, USB. Well, I'm actually using that to record, so that might cause a bit of a few issues. So I'm not going to enable that right now. The keylogger. All right, so the keylogger is going to be pretty cool. So we can save the log to a local file. We can open the local logs folder. We can delete cookies and logins, and we can get the offline log. All right, so this is going to get the offline log for us, and we can save the local log file. So it's going to be stored into our Remcos folder, so under keylogs. So let's actually access that right now. So Remcos keylogs, and we have the thing I like about it is it's sorted into the various clients that you have. So then we have the log, and this is sorted out in terms of the date. All right, so you can see right over here that we have we open up the program manager. We launched Cortana, the program manager, one more time. We opened up Notepad and hit test. There we are. We can see that right over here. We opened up Microsoft Edge, Cortana, Windows PowerShell. So yeah, this is pretty extensive, and this can really just get the amount of information this can gather on a client, on a target, is unbelievable. So what I'm going to do now is let me just open up the command and control center one more time, the control center here, and we want to go back into surveillance, and we have the screen logger, which we have disabled on in this particular case, but that's pretty simple. Then the thing where things get really interesting is the browser history, where we can essentially you can get all the browser history as to all the files you've visited or all the websites you visited. So currently on Edge, you can see I visited HackerSploit.org here, and you can essentially export all of this to a file, talk about surveillance and information gathering, all that, and reconnaissance rather on a particular target. So that is browser history. We talk about password recovery. That will essentially get passwords, any passwords found on a particular browser, which is extremely powerful. Any of the email clients, it does work with Outlook. As far as I know, Outlook 2013. I'm not sure it does work on the latest version of Outlook and Thunderbird, which many people do use. And you can also save these passwords. And then you have the instant messaging clients. So you have the Pigdin, Trillian, Miranda, ICQ, and Windows MSN or Live Messenger, which I'm guessing no one really uses. But again, that functionality does exist as well. Now I'm going to be setting this up on a target that is that does have a bit more data, so I can show you that this does work. In any case, in terms of the network, you can chat with the client. So for example, this does also pass through chat functionality. So I can say, what's up? And I can just hit start. And let me just bring up the screen capture here. You can see that it brings up a Remcos chat dialog box. So if you are running a cyber cafe or you are a system administrator, this can be great for remote support. And you can essentially offer remote support to clients, all that good stuff. So I'm just going to hit stop, and we can close that up. And we can close the network options here. So you have the SOX proxy, which I'm not covering in this particular video. I have talked about SOX proxies before. If you are passing your connection through a SOX proxy, you then have your downloader. You can then download from and to the local computer. You have the application path, so you can download files directly through a URL, which is just unbelievable. All right, so in terms of the surveillance, did I talk about the other bit of functionality here in regards to the, well, talk about local extra? What did I want to talk about a little bit more? Yeah, open web page. That essentially allows you to open a web page on the target. So for example, HackerSploit.org, and I can just hit open here and wait for that to open. And because I have user access control, that is pretty much going to disable that from being open, but you can pretty much open that on the default browser. You can open up a web page on the default browser. You have a message box, which you've talked about. You have the DLL loader, where you can essentially load DLLs directly into memory, which is extremely dangerous, as you already know. You have the fun functions that it does over here. You can disable mouse and keyboard. So this is where things get a little bit malicious, but of course can be very useful to the right people. So you can disable the mouse and keyboard, you can enable it, you can turn the monitor on and off, which is extremely scary. You can open and close the CD drive, you can swap buttons, you can hide the taskbar. So if we just hide the taskbar, this is unbelievable, man. So I'll just open up the screen capture. You can see the taskbar is hidden. If I hit show, it shows up back again. So this is extremely dangerous. So the start button is for Windows XP only, so you can play around with that. So that's all the fun functions that it does offer, which is really awesome that it does give you that additional bit of functionality here. All right, so if we talk about the audio player, that will essentially allow you to play audio on your target. I can't really do that right now. You have an alarm here. So if you play an alarm, it plays an alarm on the target, but I don't have any, you won't be able to hear it because there isn't any sound capture from that particular virtual machine. So I'll just stop that and close that up. And now that is all the functionality that we've gone through in regards to system surveillance, network extra, and now we talk about Remcos. All right, now when we say Remcos, you can rename the target. So you can rename the agent, sorry. So we can rename the agent to something else if we do want to, and we have an idea if the target is actually catching up. We can then ping the target. We can reconnect to the target. If we hit reconnect, it's going to give us a new session right over here, which it does anyway. If it does see that that we do have a bit of well, actually, if I just refresh this here, if we do have a bit of latency and you want to restart that, so if we go to the control center once more, we can then restart the session. We can show the dialog box on the target. We can elevate privileges, which we already have administrator privileges. We can close and uninstall. Now the uninstall is really great. It allows us to essentially uninstall everything and get rid of all the files on the target. So the Remcos agent will be uninstalled. All of its files and registry values will be removed. Do you want to proceed? I can hit yes. And that is going to disconnect from the target and delete all the particular files. All right. So we'll get rid of all of this here. And we'll close that up here. And there we are. All right, so we bring back the virtual machine. You can see that it got rid of the Remcos agent here. Let's take a look at the app data folder, which I'm not sure whether it actually got rid of. Let me just open this up here. That was under GRE. So yeah, it got rid of that folder. So it's absolutely cleaned it up, and the client will have no knowledge that they were actually being spied on. So you can see the extensive functionality that some remote access tools do offer, and in my opinion, as I've mentioned, Remcos is pretty much one of the best remote access tools out there, and I highly recommend it. So you can check them out at breakingsecurity.net under Remcos. They do offer other bits of software as well. You have the Vioto keylogger, the Poseidon mailer, the Octopus protector, the crypto gear encryption, and the Vioto binder, administrator switchboard, meteorite downloader. So a ton of awesome pieces of software that I just recommend as well. So the link will be in the description. You can check them out as well. You can try out the free version if you want to try it out, and then you can get the professional version as well. Really great piece of software. Yeah, so that's pretty much all that I wanted to talk about, guys. I know this video has been going along for about 46 minutes now. I do apologize for that, but hopefully you found value in this video. If you did, please leave a like down below. If you have any questions or suggestions, let me know in the comment section, on my social networks, on my website. I'll be seeing you in the next video. Peace, guys.